It was written about a child that will never be because the relationship ended. And I was like, but if I did have a child with this person, I would name her Sienna. But at the end of the day, she doesn't exist, and she just disappears into nothing because she's not here.
So, the boys just finished watching Hunter x Hunter, and I can say that the amount of glaze that this show receives is undeserved. Dare to say even the glaze engraved itself into my soul. For those who don't get it, just picture this. You come home from school, right? You hop on phone out with your friends on a snowy evening in your Spider-Man pajamas, and you're drinking the best hot chocolate you ever had in your life. That's how watching Hunter x Hunter felt to me. And one thing I've taken in mind is that some people enter your life like a candle in a dark room. The darkness is still present, but suddenly there's light bringing warmth, and you can finally see enough to keep moving forward. That's what Gon was to Killua, a boy raised on murder and orders, suddenly standing in sunlight he never knew could exist. When they first met during the Hunter exam, it didn't feel like fate or some dramatic storyline. Just two normal kids, well, far from normal, but just two normal kids crossing the same path. And without saying a word, they already picked a side. Friendship at first isn't about big declarations, it's about vibe and rhythm. And by a few episodes in, Killua and Gon already had it. They were going victory for victory in the exam, covering for one another like it was second nature. What should feel like one of God's tribulations before entering heaven was just a big adventure trip for these two. And despite their differences, carefreeness was what made them connect to one another. But shadows don't just vanish because the sun rises. When Illumi whispered his poison into Killua's ear, all that vibe and rhythm was shattered. Killua killed Bodoro, but not out of desire, but because of conditioning. Because that's the only thing he has been given purpose for, aka being an assassin. He walked away from the exam and back into his family's grasp like a dog returning to its own vomit. Now, at this point of the story, most people would have turned their back on him. But that's the thing, Gon didn't. He was furious, but not at Killua though, but at the chains wrapped around him. And that was the first time Gon chose Killua, not as an assassin or a weapon, but as a friend. He damn near pressed Illumi and broke his arm for controlling his brother, because when Killua returned, he didn't come back as Illumi's brother. He came back as Gon's companion, thanks to the words of his father, but most importantly, because Gon had already decided that he was worth saving. Well Island gave Killua his first glimpse at something resembling a real home, sitting at Mito's dinner table, munching on some real meals, laughing at simple things, and watching Gon in an environment that felt like safety. He didn't say it, but Killua was mesmerizing a script of a life he was never given. And so when it came down to him confessing that he had no dream of his own, Gon didn't pity him. In fact, Gon admired him. After asking him if he's having fun together, Gon implied that they should stick together. And to Killua, who was taught that his worth was only in his utility, that was everything to him. And then comes Heaven's Arena. Heaven's Arena built that rhythm they had into a stage. The both of them took their opponents like a joke. Pain was just another factor, but fun was their main one. And of course, Hisoka's presence. That gesture looming in the background only made their bond more unshakable. No, like seriously, the nigga was having a whole sexual awakening because of fighting Gon. We gotta do something about him. Grid Island overall was joy wrapped in adventure for them. I mean, getting trained by the embodiment of a JoJo character, collecting cards, and by episode 74, Gon and Killua were moving as if they shared one heartbeat. Gon's trust for Killua was deep, and that trust ran both ways too. But the truest glimpse of how deep Gon's trust was came later in the dodgeball match against Razor, a fight that seemed impossible to win, yet Gon kept handing the ball to Killua. Not one of the pro hunters, not Bisky, only Killua. Because Gon knew that, even if he couldn't say it, Killua's body had endured more pain than anyone in that court. He trusted him to withstand torture, to keep holding the ball even when his hands split open. Gon wanted to raise that sacrifice to get closer to his own goal, but he was too young to realize what it meant to ask that of a friend. He couldn't say how much that echoed Killua's family, and yet in that moment, Killua bore it, because this was Gon asking, and for Killua, that was enough. If we head back to the fight against the Bomber, Gon sacrificed his own hand without hesitation, not fazed by the pain as if bleeding was just another step toward victory. And once Killua saw Gon, he realized that's the same fire that drew him in, but also the same recklessness that will one day burn him. Greed Island wasn't just game and cards, it was a foreshadowing, a preview to tell us that sunlight never lasts forever. This was their light era, before the darkness learned their names.
カイトにはあんなひどいことしたくせにゴンなんでだよなんでだよ
The thing about friendship is that it never breaks all at once. It bends first. Then the first cracks show themselves in silence, holding more strain than you realize. But for Gon and Killua, those cracks were subtle. The Hunter exam, Heaven's Arena, Whale Island, Great Island. Gon kept running toward the impossible, and Killua kept following. When Gon stood before Hisoka, Killua already knew what kind of person Gon was. When Gon threw himself into Race's game of death, handed the ball to Killua of the Hunters and Bisky, Killua already knew what kind of boy he had chosen to walk beside. Gon's trust resembled faith. He unintentionally chose Killua because he believed in his endurance, in his body's ability to take punishment. And Gon wasn't wrong about it. Killua went through everything. But beneath that faith was an echo of Killua's past, the way his family treated him like a tool, like a vessel for pain. And Gon clearly didn't mean it that way. But sometimes, love can wound in the same place as hate. And by the time the Chimera Ants arrived, the bending had already begun. This arc is remembered for its brutality, its meditations on what it means to be human. Before Gon and Killua, it was the slow inversion of everything they had been through. And then came Kite. To Gon, he wasn't just a hunter, he was the spark that ignited everything. He was Jane's student, a living reminder of the goal that Gon was chasing. But more than that, he was the proof that Gon's dream was real and that his recklessness wasn't just for nothing. Kite was family whether Gon admitted it or not, which is exactly why his death would cut so deep and why Gon's grief would twist into something darker than anyone could have imagined. You know what's funny though? Like, Gon had always been this boy full of sunshines, you know? Chasing every possible path like the world would just never run out of light. But when Kite died, that sunshine faded. His eyes, once opened with wonder, just narrowed into something unrecognizable, just deep and desperate and empty and just drowning in rage. His voice, who once used to be carried by curiosity, was now shook with fury. Even before Kite's death was certain, the boy we knew was already sleeping. That time when he was sitting across Pitu, his hands just fixed, his face fixed, his eyes fixed. He was that fearless and with demand. He faced Pitu with not grief, but with a fury that devours him. That rage of his was so deep, he didn't care what it cost. Even if it meant threatening Komugi's life, an innocent girl, just to force Peter's compliance. That wasn't the Gon we met on Whale Island. That wasn't the boy fishing or chasing sunshine. That was a boy trapped in one moment, replaying the guilt like a curse. Kite hadn't truly died for him, and yet, Gon's light was already collapsing within, burning him alive. And then comes the moment. Y'all remember when Killua called Gon his light? Well, in this situation, Gon was still light for Killua, but the way he was handled was just different. Killua tries to calm Gon by telling him to ensure Kite's safety, but Gon tells Killua it's easy for him to stay calm because he doesn't care. He assumed that Killua's silence meant apathy, because Gon yet couldn't understand that people grieve differently. All Gon sees is that Kite was family, but to Killua, he wasn't. And that was the first time Gon was dealing with his emotions. It was cruel and it cut deep, because for Killua, the one person he wanted recognition from was saying out loud the same thing that his family had always implied. You're here to serve, not to be loved. Well, I feel like that's a little bit too much, but it's kind of the same path if that makes sense. And Killua walked away. He believed Gon's words. But eventually, he came back. And that is the curse of loving someone who shines. You cannot tell the sun to not rise even if it blinds you, even if it burns you alive. Paul made it easier and put it into words for us. All Killua could do now was stay by Gon's side, even if that path led to ruin, because he was the only one who could bring Gon back to his senses. Killua erased himself at that point in friendship, his fears, his wants, his individuality, and chose to become a caretaker. If Gon wanted to walk in darkness, then Killua will have to hold his hand until the very end. Then, it happened. Peter's betrayal. The last strand of hope that Kite could be saved snapped, and Gon's rage boiled into something inhuman. Gon's self-guilt turned into resentment, resentment turned into murder. He made the trade of all of his potential, all of his future, all of the boy he could have been, sacrificed in an instant just to feel like Kite's death had been avenged. Without even thinking of Killua, he became a monster. He gave himself over completely, crashing into Pitu long past the point of victory, long past the point of mercy, bro. Yo, he wasn't even fighting to win anymore, bro. He was punishing, breaking, destroying. That nigga lost his marbles, bro. I know I've seen this scene about 1,000 times, but still. And even after Pitu was dead, their corpse slashed out one more time, cutting through Gon's arm. And yet, Gon barely flinched. The pain didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore at that point, except making Pitu pay. Gon had just failed Kite. He had failed himself. His selfish nature became his very demise, where he felt like he was in the same position as Kite to compensate for his inability to protect his loved ones. The Gon who lit up Killua's world was gone, and all Killua could do was scream his friend's name as he watched hell break loose. And Gon, who once was pronounced light, sacrificed his life in darkness. The fracture was complete.
カイトも言ってたよ。俺たちどこにいても仲間だから。お。
When the storm finally passed, Gon was broken. His aura, his Nen, his very spirit burned out, and Killua was still there, carrying him. Despite seeing all the pain, he refused to let him go. And through his little sister Aluka, Killua did the impossible. He saved Gon's life when Gon couldn't even save himself, when nobody could save Gon. It was the purest act of love he could ever offer. Not fighting beside him, not shielding him from every blow, but giving Gon back a future, even if it meant losing his own place in it. But that's where the tragedy lives. Killua had built his entire world around Gon. Every choice, every step, every moment since that ship on the Onto exam had been devoted to protecting him. He was the boy who lived for someone else, whilst at the same time building his own purpose. And yet, in the silence after Gon's collapse, Killua realized that he too was a chain. His devotion for Gon had become its own prison, so he chose freedom, not only for himself, but for them both. 147 doesn't feel like an ending to me. There's no battle, no sacrifice, no nothing. Just two boys standing on a hill, saying goodbye. Gon looks forward to Jin. Killua looks forward for his own purpose, whilst having his sister Aluka aside him. Neither of them asked the other to stay. It's not anger that separates them, but something far heavier. Acceptance. Realizing that distance is what was needed between them. Because what we mourn in their goodbyes is not what they had, but what they could have had. More hunts, more games, more growth, more nights where the world felt endless because they had each other. But unfortunately, that future will never exist. Or maybe it will, but not for a long time. Their entire journey was a glimpse of it, but for now, it just disappears. You know, it is sad to see them go on their own ways, yes, but it's also natural, you know? Gon found his father, Killua found freedom, and wanted his sister to experience the same. They gave each other everything, and in doing so, they burned through the possibility of them staying together. By the end, the roles had reversed. Gon, once the light, had become the shadow, and Killua, once the assassin of shadows, had become the light that saved them. Yin and Yang, two sides of the same coin. They are soulmates, not in romance, but in brotherhood, bound forever by the dream of what they could have been, even if that dream could not survive until the end of their journey. This was their Sienna.
光だ。
Good load. So my thought process for making this video all started with this edit I saw on TikTok. So I put it on screen. Like, as soon as I saw this, I already knew what I was gonna do. The editing process, the song choice, the flow, the scripting style, everything, bro. Though I will say, I don't think I'll have a video like that ever again. Or perhaps I will, but not for a long time. Because, you know, trying to write like I was the next Shakespeare without sounding like I'm AI generated was one of the most frustrating times I've had scripting a video. I'll tell you that, bro. I wanted to tell a story whilst giving the audience, aka you guys, a build up to the end of the adventure. Kind of like my Erased video, just a little bit more in depth, more poetic, more metaphorical, if that makes sense, but not too metaphorical. Like, I don't want it to speak like I'm from the Victorian times, but, you know, it wasn't easy. So, Hunter x Hunter. I've been putting it off for the longest time, not because I had little free time, but just because I don't like dealing with long episodes, bro. Like hearing the number 148 had me foreseeing my own future trying to finish this show in less than 7 months. Like that nigga just that lazy, you ain't gotta tell me twice. But by the time I finished it, I wish I had tapped in earlier, bro. From the Hunter exams to the chairman selection arc, niggas got me talking about the Dark Continent like a fairy tale legend. It is quite that serious. Meruem and Komugi, Cold Humanity, Chimera ends finding peace, Phantom Troop, Kurapika's Hunt, Gun's foreshadowing to his true sociopathic nature, his friendship with Killua's story. Like there is so much about this show that I appreciate. Grid Island was low-key slow and probably my least favorite arc, but actually probably Chairman's selection. But you know, I enjoyed both. Definitely one of my favorite pieces of media of all time, alongside with my 2 favorite episodes, be it 136, 135, 121, I believe, and 148 as well. With that being said, we are metaphorically taking dumps on Shayapu's graves, bro. He's like if you take a glazer, make him even worse, and then turn into a ant or whatever you want to call it. I don't know, because I'm so glad he died from that poison. Like other than that, every character has been likable, especially the shit, I forgot what we call them, the royal guards. Yes, the royal guards. Every single royal guard has been likable except from him, bro. I really want to read the manga, but God forbid, bro, because I've been told it's more of a novel with all the writing Togashi has done. I've heard of his situation, and I really hope he gets assistance, or his wife, with the creator of Sailor Moon. That's so goated when you think about it, bro. But I really hope she assists him with the writing of the manga, because you know he has critical health problems. We all want him to live enough to see the Dark Continent being written and concluded. And I'm sure Togashi wants to, so, you know, keep him in your prayers. As for me, I'm most likely on my way right now to Liverpool for a friend's birthday, so I'll catch y'all whenever I feel like it. Peace.